Doctor Who has been around for over 6 decades, and the show managed to retain its relevance only because it has constantly evolved. It is now one of the longest running shows in sci-fi history and definitely owes its fame to the show's entire regeneration concept, which allows its premise to adapt and thrive under the creative visions of countless writers, producers, and actors. However, not every change has sat well with fans. Despite 60 years of regenerating, redesigning, and reimagining the Whoniverse, any major new changes made in the Doctor Who lore has often been the subject of controversy among the Whovians. Now, during the era of the 13th Doctor, a new concept of the timeless child was introduced, which sort of left the fanbase screaming, crying, and throwing up. Basically, it was revealed to us that the Doctor is not really from Gallifrey, but was actually discovered by a Gallifreyan explorer as an abandoned child beneath a wormhole, and it was from the Doctor that these Time Lords derived their ability to regenerate. This revelation was quite the twist that somehow restored the show's original sense of mystery surrounding the Doctor. Yet some fans were really upset as they had grown attached to the idea of a Gallifreyan Doctor. But little did they know what Russell T. Davies had in mind. The dude really just swooped in, took out the greatest concept of the show, and simply turned the table on the entire canon. Until then, the Doctor was immortal, who essentially regenerated with a new face and body whenever he was killed. However, with the introduction of a whole new form of regeneration, the show was fundamentally impacted. Now, with this new concept of BiGeneration, Whovians are naturally confused, so we thought of coming to your rescue and explaining what the new set of regeneration rules dictate in the Whoniverse. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. How does the 15th Doctor come into existence at the end of the giggle? The greatest innovation of Doctor Who has always been the concept of regeneration. When the first Doctor, played by William Hartnell, became too ill to continue as a Doctor, the producers came up with the idea of regeneration. This allowed the Doctor to renew his face and body whenever he was mortally wounded, rendering both the Doctor and the show itself to retain its immortality. The Doctor could continually regenerate, enabling the series to recast its lead actor and refresh its premise every few years. This became the key to the show's longevity and an integral part of its creative DNA, but in its 60-year special, The Giggle, Doctor Who has once again changed the rules of regeneration. At the end of The Giggle, the Toymaker reveals himself as the mastermind behind the madness engulfing humanity. Having escaped his domain and entered reality, he can now manipulate it to fit his own twisted games. At Unit headquarters, he wreaked havoc by turning bullets into flowers and killing all the Unit soldiers by transforming them into balloons. But the Toymaker's most dangerous move comes when he takes control of Unit's galvanic beam, which is a massive alien laser, and aims it at the rest of the world, threatening an ultimate global destruction. To further taunt the 14th Doctor, he targets Kate Stewart, Mel Bush, and Donna Noble with the crosshairs, but the Doctor demands that the Toymaker deal with him directly. After all, it was the first Doctor who defeated the Toymaker years ago, so they should level the playing field with another game. The Toymaker agrees and then abruptly shoots the Doctor in the chest with a galvanic beam. I mean, sure, the Doctor cannot die, but he does begin to regenerate as the familiar yellow light glows around his face, and Mel and Donna grab his hands. However, something unusual happens because the light stops, and he realizes that his regeneration is different from anything he has gone through before. So the Doctor instructs Mel and Donna to pull at his arms, and when they do, he splits into 2 different individual bodies. So instead of transitioning into a new person, the latest incarnation of the Doctor splits from the old one, resulting in 2 separate Doctors. Although both of them retain the Doctor's memories, each has distinct physical bodies and personalities. They even divided the clothes the 14th Doctor was wearing, with the 15th Doctor taking his underpants, shoes, shirt, and tie to ensure he looked presentable for the camera. However, they're more like twins than clones. Then, of course, the TARDIS also underwent a similar BiGeneration process to provide each of the Doctors with a TARDIS and enable them to lead their separate lives. Overall, that's how the 15th Doctor simply branched out of the 14th's body, turning the table on the entire regeneration concept and introducing the mythical idea of BiGeneration within the franchise. Why do we think the BiGeneration happened? At first, I was not entirely sure about how BiGeneration was even possible, but my main idea is that the 14th Doctor endured an immense amount of bodily trauma in a short period through forced regeneration, degeneration, actual regeneration, and then another regeneration, causing their body to split under the strain. Plus, I also believe that BiGeneration occurred because the Doctor was still within the first 24 hours of their regeneration, a period during which they would have some residual cellular regeneration energy for healing purposes, similar to how the 10th Doctor grew a spare hand in the Christmas Invasion episode. Apart from that, at some point Russell T. Davies had mentioned that the 14th Doctor would properly regenerate into Ncuti Gatwa, which might explain why the 15th Doctor seems to have a sense of what's going on with his former self even post his BiGeneration. Until now, Time Lords could not remember their interactions with their previous incarnations because each of their time streams are usually out of sync. Of course, they do have a rough idea of what might be going through their past selves' minds, but they usually do not have any clue about the specific events taking place, and we have seen this happen in the 3 Doctors, the 5 Doctors, the Day of the Doctor, and the Doctor Falls. I believe that because the Toymaker isn't from our universe, his meddling caused the 14th Doctor to regenerate at the wrong time, leading to the 15th Doctor coming into existence earlier than he should have in the Doctor's timeline, which is how the entire myth behind BiGeneration became a reality.
I'm the Doctor.
And I'm the Doctor.
And according to the rules, you can't say no.
Why was BiGeneration considered to be a myth? So I've come up with 2 possible theories as to why the entire concept of BiGeneration was considered a myth. The first is that it was a safety mechanism of the timeless child that Tecton was unaware of or unable to genetically transfer into the base DNA of all Gallifreyans, who would later be known as the Time Lords. The idea that it could happen was almost woven into their minds throughout their history, laying dormant in a way similar to how Stooky Bill made his way into the subconscious of the human race or the coordinates etched into the space hearse by the Fisher King in both Under the Lake and Before the Flood episodes of Doctor Who. The idea stays dormant but emerges from the subconscious in the form of myths. Now, the second theory is that there haven't been any recorded cases of BiGeneration. Assuming my theories about why it happened are correct, it must have occurred during the Time War at some point. The Daleks knew that Time Lords could regenerate, so they likely entered the war with the aim of exterminating these Time Lords before they had a chance to regenerate normally. However, in rare instances where Time Lords survived, they may have experienced enough trauma to trigger BiGeneration. These cases probably went unreported during the active war because there wasn't enough time to document them all, and both incarnations were likely killed shortly afterward, preventing any news from spreading. The Time Lords might have only discovered BiGeneration was real after the war, but because all the Doctors saw of Gallifrey post-war was when he was reporting on the hybrid, it wasn't necessary to bring it up, but again, these are just my own personal theories, not an official statement from the franchise. What does the BiGeneration mean for the Whoniverse? The entire BiGeneration process allowed the 14th Doctor to retire on Earth, settling down with Donna Noble to recover from his past traumas, while the 15th Doctor continued his travels. According to the 15th Doctor, he is a product of the 14th's future and has already benefited from the healing process his predecessor is about to begin. This premise paved the way for Ncuti Gatwa to portray a completely revitalized version of the Doctor, unburdened by the pains of his long and complex life. Not just that, the process of BiGeneration opens the door for past Doctors to return in fresh and imaginative ways, because I remember Russell T. Davies mentioning how BiGeneration has affected the entire Doctor Who timeline, causing each past Doctor to split from their successor and form a whole Doctorverse when the 14th Doctor split from the 15th. This concept has already been explored in Tales of the TARDIS, where an older 7th Doctor tells his former companion Ace how time streams are funny things because in some, he regenerates and in others, he does not. This concept means that past Doctors could return as versions of themselves from beyond their original lifespan, which eliminates the need to explain his aging in return appearances and allow other Doctors to reflect on their time in the TARDIS. Consequently, the entire BiGeneration concept allows the past Doctors to reappear in Doctor Who or spin-offs like Tales of the TARDIS to further the stories and evolve their characters in a refreshing manner. This liberates stories that involves any former Doctors, as they no longer need to fit neatly into their established timelines. which means now every Doctor has a chance to return and grow beyond who they were at the moment of their regeneration. Of course, it is worth noting that despite the infinite storytelling opportunities BiGeneration invites, it is not without its drawbacks, but we will touch on that topic a bit later. Now, coming to the most infamous theory, according to the 15th Doctor, BiGeneration is a completely new concept for the show, though he explains that even if the idea existed, it was just a myth. So as of now, both the 14th and 15th Doctors are still the Doctors, sharing the Doctor's memories and abilities, and can now coexist with each other, having their own TARDIS. Although the 15th Doctor did get a pretty cool jukebox in his, nonetheless, both can go on to have their own adventures, and while the 14th Doctor, burdened by his pain and guilt from his past adventures, he's encouraged to settle down for a while with Donna and his family. The 15th meets his new human sidekick Ruby Sunday and goes on to have his own crazy quests. Still, there are a few mysteries that this new fangled BiGeneration has left us with. The premiere episodes of the 14th season of Doctor Who have already clarified that the 15th rendition of the Doctor retains his two hearts, but what happens to the 14th one? Does this mean that when the 14th Doctor dies, he can still regenerate? Does he still have two hearts as a Time Lord, or is he now closer to being human, like the last time showrunner Russell T Davies used his dual David Tennant trick in 2008's Season 4 finale, Journey's End? And why did this face come back? Well, Donna's theories that it was the Doctor's way of dealing with all the pain he never processed. By reverting back to a familiar face, he could settle down with an old friend, and with the 14th Doctor seemingly settling into early retirement with a noble Temple family, this theory seems plausible. However, it is highly unlikely that he will stay retired for very long. Whatever it might be, with this new canon-shattering change, Tennant is essentially being given free rein to continue his adventures as a Doctor, separate from Gatwa's 15th Doctor, and with Russell T Davies eager to expand the Whoniverse into a mega franchise on par with Marvel, a Tennant-led 14th Doctor spin-off seemed like something the Giggle was setting us up for. Hopefully, Tennant traveling universe in his own TARDIS does not overshadow Gatwa's recently launched era as the 15th Doctor. Whatever the case, the Whoniverse just got a whole lot bigger and is full of potential.
One more day!
Is the concept of BiGeneration a part of Doctor Who's main canon? So even though the entire Doctor Who franchise went for a rebrand with Ncuti Gatwa's 15 and marketed the new season as the first instead of being season 14, Davies has still not confirmed whether his theory about the ubiquitous occurrence of BiGeneration throughout the Doctor's timeline is a part of the canon. It seems unlikely at this stage, as he clearly stated to be just one of his theories during commentary for The Giggle. If this hypothesis does become part of Doctor Who's continuity, the developments surrounding it may be addressed later on. On the other hand, BiGeneration as a process could remain a mystery, and maybe the franchise will decide to never resolve the confusion around the whole BiGeneration process, because the timeless child story has now been retconned, with a toymaker claiming responsibility in The Giggle for meddling in the Doctor's past. But the BiGeneration twist isn't as easy to explain or clear up, and to be honest, Russell T Davies' writing has raised more questions than it has answered, and resolving all of them seems unlikely and perhaps unnecessary. There is currently very little to go on beyond one instance of BiGeneration, so the full extent of the change is yet to be seen. Unless other Doctors are shown to BiGenerate, it will be impossible to determine whether the entire double Doctor instance in The Giggle was an isolated case. As of now, I think Davies may leave the impact of BiGeneration up to interpretation, which none of the questions it poses ever receiving an official answer, because we all know that a Doctor Who show is always at its best when there are unsolved mysteries, and BiGeneration is just the latest in a long line to encourage more theorizing and speculation among the Whovians. In a way, BiGeneration allows for even more hypothesis regarding its inception, consequences, and aims for a solid future within the franchise. I understand that it was the timeless child that certainly generated this debate, but the topic was often discussed in terms of dislike among fans rather than speculation. This could be partly due to the timeless child's definitive nature, whereas BiGeneration's fluid and incomplete backstory invites more open-ended discussions. So all I can presume is that the very nature of the show means that the subject of BiGeneration will likely return at some point in the distant future. Until then, this new concept will simply remain the enigmatic means by which Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor began his tenure as the Time Lord. BiGeneration may have brought about many questions following its addition to Doctor Who, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a valid contribution.
I don't know.
What kind of drawbacks does the introduction of BiGeneration create for the franchise? Okay, so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. In a series like Doctor Who, where time travel is the central theme of action, I do not see the need to clone characters to keep them around after their death. The Doctor's face may go through many changes with each regeneration, but the past incarnations can always return if the Doctor revisits a point in time and space that they have already visited before. So instead of creating numerous new versions of familiar Doctors, Doctor Who could involve former stars through time travel. This approach helps maintain a cleaner, more consistent timeline and aligns with established precedent. Plus, I don't know if you guys remember, but over the years, the Doctor has encountered their former selves on numerous occasions. The first instance was in 1973 during Doctor Who's 10th anniversary special, The Three Doctors, which brought together the first three incarnations of the Time Lord to face the ancient Time Lord Omega. This was followed by the Five Doctors in 1983, celebrating the series' 20th anniversary, and the Two Doctors in 1985, which united the 6th and 2nd Doctors, even in the modern era. The 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor, featured the 10th and 11th Doctors along with a secret incarnation of John Hurt's War Doctor. While these past adventures show that previous Doctors can be brought back through time travel rather than as diverging bi-generated versions of themselves, this approach to multi-Doctor stories missed out on some of the benefits of BiGeneration. The time travel method requires finding where in each Doctor's timeline the adventure occurs, working within a limited time frame. It also limits past Doctors to familiar roles, avoiding any contradictions or development in their existing stories, essentially freezing them in time. But of course, you cannot make everyone happy because there are some fans who prefer to see past Doctors remain unchanged forever. Will the BiGeneration ever match up with the emotional impact that every regeneration of Doctor Who left behind? While the concept of BiGeneration opens up many amazing new possibilities for the past Doctors, especially from a storytelling perspective, there is also a very major risk that this new rule of BiGeneration could undermine the emotional stakes of every regeneration story. So far, the franchise has treated the idea of regeneration to be a sort of death, even if it did ultimately allow the Doctor to evade his demise by going on to live in a new form. So even if the Doctor goes on to live, every incarnation has still undergone a form of death in their regeneration, which means everything that was unique to that particular rendition of the Doctor vanishes from existence and is replaced with a whole new face and a new personality. So in a way, if we see every incarnation of the Doctor survive the regeneration process alongside their successor, the entire emotional impact of this death seems to be lost. For a series like Doctor Who, where the protagonist character is practically immortal, it is a rather daunting task to consistently maintain a real sense of stakes and danger. However, when the franchise treated each regeneration as a genuine death for that particular incarnation of the Doctor, it helped to achieve this feeling in a twisted way. If you remember, when the 13th Doctor was about to regenerate, she had to make the difficult choice of letting her companion Yasmin Yaz Khan go. Even if they had developed feelings for each other, the Doctor knew she was about to transform into a completely different person from the one Yaz loved. Apart from this, the trauma of regeneration was especially evident in the 10th Doctor's final story, The End of Time, where for the first time ever we saw a version of the Doctor who didn't want to die and lose his current self. With BiGeneration, the 10th Doctor wouldn't have to face that personal death he so feared, nor would Yaz have lost the version of the Doctor she loved. But even then, while BiGeneration could potentially offer happier endings and greater closure for past Doctors and their companions, it undeniably diminishes the emotional impact of the Doctor's sacrifices, effectively removing the concept of death for the Time Lord. Does BiGeneration set a bad precedent for Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor Who? The Doctor Who franchise is at the helm of a rebrand in the first time since 2005, and with Disney backing Russell T Davies's keen interest to expand the Whoniverse, it is currently experiencing rapid growth. This is an incredibly exciting time for fans, as the show, which has long been cherished alongside major franchises like the MCU and Star Wars, is finally getting a similar level of attention and development. However, as these spin-offs, new Doctor Who content, and bigger budgets for grander storytelling are on the horizon, it is crucial that Doctor Who does not lose sight of its core story, which has always been on the current Doctor and their companion. Luckily, Davies has confirmed that there are no plans to bring back David Tennant's 14th Doctor at this time, which ensures that Ncuti Gatwa's new Doctor alongside Millie Gibson's Ruby Sunday will not be overshadowed as they are embarking on their new adventures aboard the TARDIS. However, Davis is not the only one shaping the future of Doctor Who. Alongside his fellow producers at Bad Wolf, Disney now has a say in the show's direction, adding their own notes and pressure as they see fit. This also regenerates the risk of favoritism, where popular Doctors might be brought back for spin-offs or larger roles to attract more viewers, especially if the main ongoing series sees a decline in the viewership. If BiGeneration is used as an excuse to shift the focus of the Whoniverse back toward former Doctors and away from the current Time Lord, there is a risk of the main Doctor Who losing its essence. The show could become bogged down in spin-offs that are merely continuations of past eras, while a spin-off series that explores different corners of the Whoniverse could be a beautiful expansion. Spin-offs that mirror Doctor Who with a different Doctor in the TARDIS risk confusing casual viewers, dividing the fans and undermining the Ncuti Gatwa's current Doctor. I'm only hoping Davis somehow manages to avoid these pitfalls, which have the potential to prove fatal for the franchise. Instead, the goal should be to use BiGeneration to explore new emotional depths for the Doctor, rather than indulging in a gimmicky fan service. So, that was my 2 cents of the new BiGeneration concept of the Whoniverse. Honestly, I am not hating the new revamp of Doctor Who. The premiere episodes were pretty solid, and Ncuti Gatwa is perfectly quirky in his own way as the Doctor, but still the BiGeneration situation is sort of a gray area. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment box below. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.